I stood in the hallway, but I didn't hear the sounds of lovemaking. I heard the sounds of training. My daughter-in-law wasn't embracing my son. She was clutching him by the hair like a dog, whispering, "You're a good boy. You gave me everything." When I burst in screaming that she was a con artist who had killed 3 husbands, Lucas didn't even cover himself up. He looked at me with eyes glazed over, drunk on lust, and just laughed. "Mom," he said, "I don't care what she is as long as she lets me feel like this." In that moment I realized my son wasn't a victim. He had willingly traded his father's memory for the body of a monster. Chapter 1. The Silence of Salamanca. The morning sun over Madrid did not feel like a blessing. It felt like an interrogation. It was a sharp, relentless white light that exposed the dust motes dancing in the high-ceilinged living room of our apartment on Calle de Velázquez. I sat in the wingback chair, the velvet fabric scratching slightly against my forearms, a cup of café con leche cooling in my hands. It had been exactly 3 weeks since the funeral. 3 weeks since Robert, my husband of 35 years, had collapsed on the tennis court, leaving me with a silent apartment and a lifetime of memories that now felt more like ghosts than comforts. The apartment was pristine, a museum of our life together. The mahogany bookshelves were filled with his architectural journals, his reading glasses still resting on the side table next to a half-finished copy of El País. For a moment, just a fleeting second, the silence felt peaceful. The city outside was waking up, the hum of scooters and the distant chatter of tourists blending into a rhythmic lullaby that almost convinced me everything was normal. I took a sip of the cold coffee. It was bitter, but I swallowed it anyway, needing the shock to my system. I stood up, tightening the silk belt of my robe, and walked toward the balcony doors. I intended to water the geraniums, a mundane task to anchor myself in the present. But as I passed the hallway mirror, I caught my reflection. 57 years old. My blonde hair, usually kept in a strict chignon, was loose and fraying at the ends. My eyes, once the bright blue that Robert loved to compare to the Mediterranean, looked washed out, grayed by grief. I looked away, unable to bear the sight of my own vulnerability, and decided to go downstairs to the garage, Robert's sanctuary. The building had a private underground garage, accessible only by a key fob that felt heavy in my pocket. The elevator ride down was slow, the mechanical whirring echoing in the small metal box. I needed to see it. The 1967 Jaguar E-Type. British racing green. It was not just a car, it was the 3rd member of our marriage. Robert had bought it a wreck 20 years ago and spent every Sunday restoring it. He treated that metal and leather with a reverence that sometimes made me jealous, though I never admitted it. I wanted to sit in the driver's seat, smell the old leather and the faint scent of his cologne that I knew would still linger there. The elevator doors slid open with a chime that sounded too loud in the concrete quiet. I walked across the gray floor, my slippers making a soft scuffing sound. I knew the spot by heart. Bay 42, tucked in the corner away from the ramp to protect it from dust. I turned the corner, my hand already reaching out to touch the cold metal of the hood. My hand met only air. I stumbled forward, my momentum carrying me into an empty space. I blinked, sure that the grief was causing hallucinations. I looked left then right. The concrete bay was empty. Not just empty but swept clean. The oil drip pan that usually sat underneath the engine was gone. The custom car cover, folded neatly on the shelf, was gone. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. I spun around looking at the other cars, a modern Audi, a vintage Fiat, thinking perhaps I had the wrong floor. But no, the number 42 was painted clearly on the pillar. The Jaguar was gone. 20 years of Robert's passion vanished. I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling so hard I dropped it. It clattered on the concrete, the sound echoing like a gunshot. I scrambled to pick it up, cracking the screen. I was about to dial the police when a thought, sickening and heavy, settled in my stomach. The garage required a key card. A specific code. Only 2 people had it. Me. And our son Lucas. Chapter 2. The Scent of Betrayal. I did not call the police. Instead, I went back upstairs, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I sat at the dining table and waited. I knew Lucas was coming over for lunch. He had mentioned it vaguely in a text message the day before, saying he had news. At noon, the front door unlocked. Lucas walked in, looking more like his father than ever, with that same dark hair and easy stride, but there was a tension in his shoulders that was new. And he wasn't alone. Isabella was with him. My daughter-in-law. She was a striking woman, I could not deny that. 30 years old, Spanish, with raven hair that fell in glossy waves down her back and dark eyes that always seemed to be calculating the value of everything they touched. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere dress that clung to her figure, and on her arm was a new designer handbag, the leather stiff and shiny. Lucas kissed my cheek, but his lips were cold. Isabella offered a tight smile, her perfume, something heavy, musky, and expensive, filling the room instantly. We sat for lunch. I had ordered tapas from the local deli because I couldn't bring myself to cook. The conversation was stilted. They talked about the weather, about a new gallery opening in Chueca, about everything except the elephant in the room. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I put down my fork, the metal clinking against the china. Lucas, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. I went to the garage this morning. The Jaguar is gone. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Lucas didn't look at me. He looked at Isabella. She reached out and placed her hand on his forearm, her manicured nails digging slightly into his skin. It was a gesture of support, perhaps, or maybe a command. Lucas cleared his throat. Mom, he started, his voice cracking. We need to talk about that. I sold it. The words hung in the air, absurd and violent. You sold it. I whispered. It wasn't yours to sell. Lucas looked up then, defensiveness hardening his features. Dad left everything to you, but he wanted me to handle the estate. We, Isabella and I. We have an opportunity, Lucas continued. An opportunity, Isabella purred, her voice smooth like warm honey. Lucas has a chance to invest in my brother's vineyard in Rioja. It is a sure thing, Elena. But we needed liquid capital immediately. The car was just sitting there. Robert would have wanted Lucas to build his future, no? I looked at her, really looked at her. Beneath the veneer of concern, there was a glint of triumph in her eyes. And looking at my son, I saw not a man making a business decision, but a man under a spell. He looked exhausted, his eyes rimmed with red, his gaze constantly flicking to her as if seeking permission to speak. I stood up, shaking. Get out, I said. Lucas stood up too. Mom, be reasonable. It's done. I got a good price. 80,000 euros. 80,000? I laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. That car was worth 3 times that. You gave it away. You gave your father's life away for a vineyard that probably doesn't exist. Isabella stood up then, her movements fluid and predatory. She walked over to Lucas and whispered something in his ear. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the effect. Lucas shivered, his eyes glazing over, the fight draining out of him. He nodded slowly. We are leaving, he said robotically. They retreated to the guest room to pack the few things Lucas still kept here. I stayed in the dining room, numb. A few minutes later, I walked down the hallway to check if they had left. The door to the guest room was slightly ajar. I heard a sound, a low guttural moan that stopped me in my tracks. Through the crack in the door I saw them. Lucas was sitting on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. Isabella was standing between his legs, her dress pulled up to her hips. She was pressing his face against her stomach, her fingers tangled in his hair, pulling his head back sharply. It wasn't an embrace of comfort. It was an assertion of dominance. You did good, she whispered, her voice husky and low, carrying through the quiet hallway. You are a good boy, Lucas. You do what is necessary for us. Do you want me to make you forget her yelling? Do you? Yes, Lucas gasped, his voice wrecked with a desperate, pathetic hunger. Please, Bella. Please. She pushed him back onto the bed, her movements sharp and controlling. I turned away, bile rising in my throat. This wasn't just a bad marriage. This was something darker. My son was not a partner. He was a possession. I retreated to the kitchen, the image of his submission burned into my retinas. He had sold his father's legacy not for a vineyard, but to buy the affection of a woman who looked at him with the cold detachment of a butcher eyeing a cut of meat. Chapter 3. The Ghost in the Machine. The phone rang late that evening. The apartment was dark, the only light coming from the street lamps on Velasquez filtering through the sheer curtains. I picked up the landline, a habit Robert had insisted we keep. Hello. Elena? It is Mateo. Mateo. Robert's mechanic. The man who owned the restoration shop in the industrial district of Vallecas. He was a rough man, hands permanently stained with grease, but he had a heart of gold and had been Robert's confidant for decades. Mateo, I said, feeling fresh tears prick my eyes. Lucas sold the car. I know, Elena, Mateo said, his voice grave. I have it. Lucas brought it to a dealer I know. He was desperate, Elena, trying to get cash fast. The dealer called me because he knows I worked on that car for 20 years. I bought it. I paid the $80,000. Oh, Mateo, I sobbed. I will pay you back. I have some savings. No, listen to me, he interrupted. This is not about the money. You need to come to the shop. Now, tonight. There is something in the car. Something Robert hid. I took a taxi to Vallecas. The industrial park was desolate at night, shadows stretching long and ominous across the corrugated metal fences. Mateo met me at the gate, sliding the heavy iron door open. Inside, under the hum of fluorescent lights, sat the Jaguar. It looked beautiful and mournful, a green jewel in the grimy workshop. Mateo didn't waste time on pleasantries. He led me to the car. 2 months ago Robert came here, he said. He was worried, Elena. He told me he was looking into Isabella. He didn't trust her, Mateo continued. He said if anything happened to him, and if the car ever left the family, I was to show you this. Mateo opened the passenger door. He reached under the dashboard, fiddling with a hidden latch behind the glove compartment. A small panel popped open. Inside was a thick leather-bound notebook and a USB drive. He was investigating her, Mateo said softly. He hired a private investigator. An old friend of ours, Gabriel. I took the notebook. My hand shook as I opened it. It was Robert's handwriting. Sharp architectural all caps. Elena, if you are reading this, I failed to protect us. Isabella is not who she says she is. Her real name is Lucia Vargas. She has done this before in Milan and Buenos Aires. She targets families with assets and sons who are easily swayed. She is draining us, Elena. She is going to take the apartment. She is going to take everything. I am gathering proof. Do not trust her. Protect Lucas. I stared at the words. The world tilted on its axis. Robert had known. He had been fighting a war I didn't even know existed while I was worrying about dinner parties and gardening. You need to see Gabriel, Mateo said. He has the rest of the file. Robert died before they could finish it. I held the notebook to my chest, the leather feeling warm like living skin. The grief I had felt all day hardened into something else. It crystallized into a cold, sharp purpose. I wasn't just a widow anymore. I was a soldier who had just been handed a weapon. Chapter 4. Shadows in the Bedroom. Gabriel's office was in a nondescript building near Plaza de Castilla. He was a man of few words, with eyes that had seen too much of the world's ugliness. He sat me down and plugged the USB drive into a large monitor. I have been tracking her since Robert passed, Gabriel said. She moves fast. Now that Robert is gone, she is accelerating the timeline. She needs Lucas to liquidate the assets before probate closes completely. He clicked a file. Photos appeared on the screen. Isabella or Lucia, in Milan, hanging on the arm of an elderly Italian man. Then a death certificate. Then bank records showing a transfer of millions to a Swiss account. Then another photo. Isabella in Buenos Aires, younger, with a wealthy rancher. Another death certificate. Suicide this time. She is a black widow, Gabriel said flatly. But she doesn't kill them directly. She destroys them. She isolates them, spends their money, and drives them to ruin or death. And Lucas is her current meal ticket. But there is more, Gabriel said. He hesitated, looking at me with pity. You need to know exactly how she operates. It is not just psychological. It is physical. She ensnares them. He opened a video file. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. It was grainy surveillance footage, taken with a long-range lens through a window. It wasn't Lucas in the video. It was Isabella. She was in a high-end hotel room, with a man I recognized. It was our family lawyer Alejandro, the man who was supposed to be handling Robert's will. The scene was explicit but not in the way of love. It was transactional. Isabella was pushing Alejandro onto the bed, straddling him, whispering in his ear while she undid his tie. The camera zoomed in. I could see her face. It was cold, bored, even as her body moved with practiced sensuality. She was using sex as a bribe. Pause it, I whispered, feeling sick. Gabriel paused the video. She is sleeping with the executor of the estate, he said. That is how she got Lucas the power of attorney so quickly. That is how she is going to get your apartment. They are forging documents, Elena. I felt a cold rage replacing the grief. She was turning my son against me, sleeping with our lawyer, and defiling my husband's memory. They were going to claim Robert was mentally incompetent when he left everything to you, and that Lucas was the sole heir. And Lucas? My poor stupid Lucas was so blinded by lust and manipulation that he was handing her the knife to cut our throats. I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. Give me the drive, I said. I am going to get my son back. Chapter 5: The Confrontation. I drove to La Latina like a madwoman. The Madrid sky had finally broken open, unleashing a torrential downpour that turned the narrow, winding cobblestone streets into slick rivers of oil and light. My windshield wipers were thrashing back and forth, matching the frantic rhythm of my heart. I double-parked outside Lucas's building, not caring about the ticket. I had Robert's notebook clutched to my chest inside my coat, shielding it from the rain like it was a holy relic. I pounded on the heavy wooden door of the loft until my knuckles bruised. It took 5 minutes for Lucas to answer. When he finally swung the door open, the smell hit me first. Stale wine, damp laundry, and that cloying, expensive musk perfume that seemed to cling to everything now. Lucas looked like a ghost. He was wearing only gray sweatpants, his chest pale and thin. His hair was greasy and his eyes were bloodshot, unfocused, blinking against the hallway light. Mom! He sounded thick-tongued. What the hell are you doing here? I didn't ask for permission. I pushed past him, marching into the living room. Where is she? I demanded, spinning around. She's out. A meeting, Lucas mumbled, rubbing his face. Mom, you can't just barge in here like this. I'm not here to argue, Lucas. I'm here to save your life. I slammed the leather-bound notebook onto his glass coffee table. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. Read it. He stared at the book, confusion clouding his face. What is this? It's your father's voice, I said, my voice shaking. He wasn't just tinkering with cars in that garage, Lucas. He was investigating her. Her name isn't Isabella. It's Lucia. She did this in Milan. She did this in Buenos Aires. She is sleeping with Alejandro to steal the apartment, Lucas. She is playing you. Lucas laughed, a dry, hysterical sound. He turned away, walking toward the kitchen. You're crazy. Dad was losing it at the end. You know that. He was paranoid. He wasn't paranoid. He was terrified for you. I ripped my laptop out of my bag, jammed the USB drive in, and threw it open on the counter in front of him. I didn't play the sex tape with the lawyer. I couldn't do that to him, not yet. Instead, I brought up the graveyard file Gabriel had compiled. Look at them, Lucas. I grabbed his shoulders, forcing him to look at the screen. Look at the dates. Giovanni in Milan. Dead of a heart attack 2 years after marriage. Bankruptcy declared 3 weeks prior. Matteo in Argentina, suicide. Look at their faces. They look just like you. Rich, lonely, and naive. Lucas stared at the screen. The blue light illuminated his face, washing out the color. For the first time in weeks, I saw the fog lift. His eyes widened. He reached out a trembling finger and touched the screen, tracing the face of the Italian man. She told me she lived in Milan. He whispered, his voice barely audible. She said she studied art history there. She was studying how to bleed families dry. I pleaded, softening my voice. Lucas, please. Look at me. She doesn't love you. She is eating you alive. He looked at me, Tears welled in his eyes. Mom! The front door clicked open. The air in the room changed instantly. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. Isabella walked in. She was soaking wet, her black hair plastered to her cheeks, her trench coat dripping onto the floor. She looked like a drowned siren, beautiful and terrifying. She took in the scene in 1 second. Me desperate and disheveled. Lucas crying over a laptop. The notebook on the table. She didn't gasp. She didn't run. She didn't even blink. She smiled. A slow, terrifying curving of her lips that didn't reach her eyes. You have been busy, Elena, she said, her voice calm, kicking off her wet heels. Lucas looked between us, panic rising in his chest. Bella? Mom says. She has photos. She says. Isabella ignored me completely. She walked right past me as if I were a piece of furniture. She walked up to Lucas, invading his space, pressing her wet body against his. She reached up and cupped his face, her thumbs wiping away his tears. And you believe her? She cooed. You believe the woman who has tried to control you since the day you were born? No, Lucas stammered, his eyes locking onto hers, mesmerizing. But the photos, Bella. The names. Photoshop, she said dismissively. Or old lovers. Does it matter? Look at me, Lucas. She grabbed his hand and shoved it down the front of her dress, placing it right over her heart. Do you feel this? This is real. What happens in this room? That is real. She wants to take it away. She wants you to be her little boy forever. She wants to keep the money, keep the apartment, and keep you locked in your childhood bedroom. She leaned in, her lips brushing his ear. I could hear the whisper. Does she know how you scream my name? Does she know I'm the only one who makes you feel like a man? She kissed him then. It wasn't romantic. It was violent. It was acclaiming. She grabbed his hair, pulling his head back, devouring him. I watched in horror as my son melted. The doubt, the logic, the fear. It all vanished, replaced by that drugged, desperate hunger I'd seen before. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her closer, surrendering to the addiction. He broke the kiss, breathless, and looked at me. The warmth was gone from his eyes. Get out, Mom. Lucas, please. She's lying. I said get out. He screamed, his face twisting into ugly rage. Take your conspiracy theories and leave us alone. Bella is my wife. You are just a bitter, jealous old widow. Isabella looked at me over his shoulder. Her eyes were dead, flat, shark-like. You heard him, Elena, she said. Leave. Or I will call the police and tell them you attacked us. Chapter 6, The Bitter End. I didn't give up. Not immediately. For the next 2 weeks, I fought like a cornered animal. I went to the police, I went to the courts, I drained my bank account hiring new lawyers. But in Spain, the wheels of justice turn slowly, and money greases them like oil. Alejandro, our corrupt family lawyer, had built a fortress around them. He filed documents, some with Lucas's genuine signature, some that looked painfully forged, claiming Robert was mentally incompetent when he wrote his wishes, and that Lucas, as the male heir, had full power of attorney immediately. Every door I knocked on slammed in my face. It's a civil matter, Senora. It's a family dispute. The documents look legal. Then came the call. Tuesday morning. They're running, Gabriel said. His voice was grim. They booked a flight. One way. Cayman Islands via Miami. They liquidated the main accounts this morning at 9 a.m. I didn't think. I just moved. I drove to Barajas Airport, tearing down the highway, ignoring speed limits. I ran through Terminal 4, my breath tearing at my lungs. I was a mess, sweaty, frantic, looking exactly like the crazy woman they claimed I was. I found them at the VIP check-in counter. Lucas! I screamed, my voice echoing off the high glass ceilings. People turned to stare. Lucas froze. He turned slowly. He looked different. He was wearing a new bespoke navy suit. He looked tan, rested, expensive. Isabella stood beside him, draped in a white fur stole despite the Madrid heat, looking like royalty. I ran up to them, grabbing Lucas's arm. You can't go. She is stealing everything. Lucas looked down at my hand on his sleeve. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked at me with a terrifying, detached pity. The police aren't coming, Mom, he said softly. Alejandro fixed it. It's all legal. It's just family assets. He shook my hand off, brushing the fabric of his suit as if I had soiled it. We sold the apartment this morning, he added casually, as if mentioning he'd bought a newspaper. To a private equity firm. You have 30 days to vacate. The eviction notice is in the mail. I staggered back, physically struck by the words. You sold my home? The home your father built? The home you grew up in? It was my inheritance, he said with a shrug. And I need it to start my new life. Madrid is suffocating. Isabella stepped forward then. She moved into my personal space, the smell of that musk perfume overwhelming, choking me. She leaned in close, her lips inches from my ear, her voice a silky whisper meant only for me. You should have just let him go, Elena, she hissed. I would have left you a little pension. I'm not a monster. But you had to fight. You had to play detective. She pulled back, smiling brightly for the onlookers. Now you have nothing. No husband. No son. No home. She turned to Lucas, sliding her hand down his back, resting it possessively on his hip. Come, darling. The lounge is waiting. I need champagne. Lucas turned his back on me. He didn't look back. He didn't hesitate. He walked toward the security checkpoint with the woman who had hollowed him out. I stood alone in the middle of the terminal, surrounded by thousands of travelers rushing to their destinations. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A notification from the bank. Transaction declined. Insufficient funds. My accounts were frozen. The injunction had gone through. I walked to the massive glass windows overlooking the tarmac. I pressed my hand against the cold glass. I watched the plane taxi out, a silver bird carrying my heart and my money away. I was 57 years old. I was a widow. I was homeless. My son was a monster of my own making, and the woman who had engineered my destruction was currently sipping vintage champagne in first class, her hand resting on my son's knee, victorious. There was no sudden arrest, no hero rushing in, just the deafening roar of jet engines, and the absolute, suffocating silence of a life stripped bare.